Hi everyone, my name is Charlene Villamor, and my topic is all about literary theory, specifically the parable of the prodigal son. So here are some of the most significant theories that we can relate to the specific parable, which is the prodigal son. So first is the practical criticism. So when we say practical criticism, this literary study encourages readers to examine the text without regarding any outside context like the author, the date, or any place of writing or any other contextual information that may enlighten the reader. Uh, so if we can relate this to the parable, so biblical scholar Mary Ann Tolbert analyzes the prodigal son parable in light of the psychoanalytic theory and Sigmund Freud's ideas. So Tolbert assessed that the parable in isolation, he does not compare it with other parables of a similar nature in Luke. So according to how it relates to a conscious portrayal of a wish fulfillment dream, she assesses the literary content. So according to her, the structure of this fable generates such a complex unity in the connection between the father and his two sons. So she claims that the parts present in dreams are frequently symbolic of a more complicated unity or compounded view of reality. So these three central figures or elements of the story experience division or separation in their relationship. And Tolbert argues that the wish of the parable is to reconcile these conflicting elements and restore unity. So the wish of this parable is fulfilled when its primary characters are reconciled to one another. So although this objective is not directly obtained at the conclusion of the parable, Tolbert contends that the father is indeed able to unify the two sons within himself, and the two sons are joined through the person of the father figure by the way of the statements offered by the father to each of his sons respectively. So Tolbert reiterates the concept of complex unity is further demonstrated within the narrative structure of the parable itself. So defining the story as an example of a parallel plot parable, Tolbert upholds that there are two distinct yet complementary storylines in the piece. So both of these storylines appear to the center on the experience between the two sons and their father and contain parallels in their vocabulary or themes. And the youngest son leaves home on a journey, decides to return, is received by his father and confess him and offer his father response. So similarly, the older son returns home from working in the field and receives a servant explanation of his brother's return, is received by his father to whom he issues criticism and then is offered his father response. Colbert contends that on deeper level, these similarities between two plots and the manner in which they are presented express the longing of the human heart for wholeness, for reintegration of the conflicting elements of life. So in this way, Tolbert is able to expound upon the merging of them. So next theory is cultural studies. So this means in direct opposition to practical criticism. Cultural theory examines a text within the context of its socio-cultural environment. Cultural critics believe a text should be read entirely through the lens of the text's cultural context. So, as the story unfolds, the prodigal son portrays a character whom people in society can relate to. The prodigal son asks for his inheritance from his father, spends it recklessly, and comes back home having nothing but the clothes he has on. So have you noticed that in our generation today, a lot may be rebelling and wanting to go away from their families, but in our country, since part of our culture and it's part of the Filipinos' traits and characteristics, which is having close family ties, then we seldom see this kind of scenarios. And for the last theory, it is the formalism. So formalism compels readers to judge the artistic merit of literature by examining its formal elements like language and technical skills. So formalism favors a literary canon of works that exemplify the highest standards of literature as determined by the formalist critics. So the story of the prodigal son is a parable. A parable is an illustrative story in which a familiar idea is cast beside an unfamiliar idea in such a way that the comparison helps people to better understand and grasp the unfamiliar idea. So Jesus was the artist in telling of parables. He painted vivid word pictures to dramatize his teachings, and Jesus told his parables in such a way that they were easy to visualize and thus remember. So that is why it's very important to understand that in a parable, there are certain pictures that carry the moral or point. Other details are there simply to make the story vivid or memorable and complete in the mind's of the eye of the listener. Then we should interpret the parables according to the simple principles they are meant to teach. So, Jesus himself sets us a pattern for interpretation, which he interprets certain of his parables in this simple manner. So, thank you for listening, everyone, and that ends my part.